Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the south-afrifur podcast. You're listening to myself, Ivik Wolf. We have a very special guest in Thabo Meerkat with us this evening. Hello, Thabo.
Hello.
Hi. As well as our co-host, Scratch.
Hello.
Hello. Right, so this evening we're going to be talking about positivity. We're going to be talking about the furry fandoms. Some of the things that we're also going to be talking about is the differences between um, say American fandom versus the European fandoms, as well as some of the research that Tabo's been doing in respect to the work out there. We're going to be talking about Tabo themselves, how long they've been in the fandom. Um, yeah, we're going to be covering a fair amount of ground this evening. So hopefully, and of course, if you have any questions, please do either ask in chat or wherever you want to ask the question. Throw it out there. We'll field it and we'll try to get an answer for you as soon as we can. So that's us. So good evening, Tabo. Thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate it. Um, we normally start off with asking, how long you've been in the fandom, why the interests in the things that you've done so far. What exactly is the sort of modus operandi behind it?
I have been in the fandom for quite a long time, where I joined in the late 90s of the last century. I really, really, really feel old now.
Mhm.
Um, when I joined the Dutch furry fandom, it was literally not more than 10 people. Our very first meetup in Amsterdam was, I think, 5 or 6 people,
Mhm.
of which I think two are still within the fandom. And it started to slowly grow, but I think that it really started to explode after 2006, 2007. Then also several fur cons in the Netherlands started to arise, and it really started to form well. But these days, I think we're talking about around 1,000 Dutch furries that are in our country,
Mhm.
compared to the barely 10 when I joined.
Okay. And sure, I mean, like with that kind of growth over the periods over that period of time, do you feel like the fandom itself, especially within that area, do you feel like it's got a unified front, or does it have a vast majority of like different sort of subgroups within it?
The Dutch furry fandom is very fragmented. There are several groups that, for example, one group is mostly geared towards fursuiting, the other group is mostly geared to online and to art, and there are several smaller groups that really don't are not even in contact with each other. Um, I myself am one of Gesundheit. I myself am one of the furries that are known to go to the several cliques and can actually hang out at various groups. And I have seen that a couple of times I asked jokingly from, "Hey, do you know about that and that?" No, I completely did not. Some don't even know the existence of each other.
Hmm. Okay. So, all right. So, with that sort of like setting and things like that, like how or why did you start? The projects that you've started so far. Maybe just also run us through the various kinds of projects that you have, and sort of their general purposes.
The most known project that I've been going on, well, there are two, and they're intertwined with each other: digging
Mhm.
up positivity and the yearly charity index. The digging up positivity is that I always wanted to have a YouTube channel. I had some materials now and then, but I never really knew how to bring something new to the table. So I started to basically watch other furry YouTubers and look around. Thank you for the accent remark. I started to look around for how can I add something to the table, and it turned out that I saw a lot of furries just basically talking about either the drama or the day of the day, or not very much about the positive aspects. And I really wanted to well, show that we're doing a lot of good things.
Mm.
So I started a little top 10 about the furry conventions that had raised the most for charity,
Mhm.
and that's a lot of people wanted to help to expand the list, and one of those is Charlotte Zundel, a
Mhm.
Dixie Lioness
Yeah.
from the US, and she has her help has been amazing, and thanks, she is one of the driving forces that I could go as big as what I'm doing now. But that furry charity index is only once a year. So once a month, I'm doing a furry news show, digging up positivity about all sorts of positive news around the world, not just furry related, but also items that are of interest to furries. Things about the environment, things about technology, sometimes gaming and animation movies, things like that.
Mhm.
And while it is not as growing as fast as what the average YouTube channel might do, I do get a lot of very good feedback about people that really are looking forward to the show every month,
Mm.
and yeah, that makes me feel good, makes them feel good, and yeah, positivity all around.
Yeah. All right. Um, hmm. So maybe let's obviously we sort of skirted a little bit around who you were, of course. Like, I mean, we spoke about, where the origins were, maybe more about your character. Obviously, you're European, but you've got a meerkat, which is Southern African in its
Oh yes.
origination. So, how exactly, or why meerkat, for instance?
Okay. The meerkat, there is a bit of a story behind
Hmm.
that. Before the meerkat, I was mostly known as a skunk. But my life at one point was not going very well,
Hmm.
and there were some medical implications for it. Very long story, and
Hmm.
I won't waste much time for that. But at one point, there was a little bit of a breakthrough, and I sort of had an awakening. It really felt like I woken up from a nightmare that lasted for 10 years. And I was very happy about that. But I also changed a lot in character thanks to that. And I wanted to move forward. And with that came also a new character, and which is in this case Thabo.
Hmm.
Originally, he started as a fursuit project because I wanted to lose weight, and a meerkat is slightly less out there than a skunk when it comes down to shapes. And but after I've gotten Tabo, more and more people just started to basically know me as Tabo, and the character Pegla the skunk kind of got moved towards the background.
Hmm.
The reason why I chose for a meerkat is, well, actually, a lot of people identified me a bit as a meerkat, is that I have a tendency to be very, very protective of my friends. I always
Hmm.
look out over them. I have a strong sense of family. We tend to, and this is both a blessing and a curse, we tend to work a little bit too hard to get things done. You also see that with other meerkats that are known in the furry fandom, like Titash from France and Tim Duru, also from France.
Hmm.
They both have made their mark in the furry fandom and have been working very hard to provide other furs with fun events and amazing artwork.
Hmm. Okay. So, um, with all the positivity that you're sort of digging up, um, do you have like a very specific sort of goal in mind whenever you're sort of putting that out there? Aside from the fact that digging up positivity is one of the things that you're doing, but like overall, what kind of information do you generally try to find when you're looking for the positivity?
Um, the first thing that I'm looking for are all the charity events that the furry fandom are doing. For example, all the ALS walks that are going on in America. But I also like to focus on other conventions, like your convention in South Africa, and other conventions in Europe, and since lately also in Asia. That a lot of work there is being done. One tweet is being put out in the wild to show from, hey, this is what we have done, and then nobody else is looking at it anymore. And I
Yeah.
wanted to focus a little bit on more on that, and also show that the European fandom and the American fandom, from there are the other furs out there that are doing amazing things as well.
Mm.
And also one thing that I also like to achieve with this is that a lot of new furs, or people that are trying to basically look for furries what they are, to show them that the fandom can be a very positive thing.
Mm.
Because a lot of new furs want to basically convince their parents that the furries can do good things, and they often show my videos to their parents to see,
Mm.
to demonstrate that we're doing good things in the world.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So I mean, and with that sort of niche, because if we look at a vast majority of content that gets put out there, it's generally sort of very memey, very I don't know how would you put this. It's it's very now in the way that it portrays itself in this sort of like skitty kind of 5 to 10 second little bits and pieces, whereas the work that you're doing is more, you know, it's rich with information. It tends to be a little bit more long form. Do you feel that like that's necessary or more necessary within the fandom itself?
It's not necessarily an alternative for it. It's more
Mm-hmm.
that it's another section.
Mm.
We have a lot of people that are on Instagram or on TikTok and making fun little short movies, and
Mm-hmm.
I've made quite a few of those myself as well.
Mm.
But it's a different segment, and
Mm.
I think that we appeal to different people, and there is a lot of overlap between the TikTokers, between the Insta verse, and between the videos that I do. The short little memes, they are quite fun as well, and I do enjoy them a lot too. I think it's just a different segment of the furry fandom.
Hmm. Okay. Um, I don't know, like, and personal preference, of course, does sort of go into this. I mean, like, I actually love very information heavy things. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was one video that I recently looked at which spoke about one of the controversies from last year involving poodling, and I think we can sort of go into that for a couple of seconds. Like, and I know that the video that I watched was actually it was goodness, I have to look at this. I will find this, but like one of the things that sort of was spoken about, yeah, a critique of controversy in the furry fandom by Kaba Blah Blah, for instance.
Yes, that one.
Yes, and it sort of talked about that idea of what these controversies came from, and I think the main conclusion that came from that is that it was literally much ado about nothing. Whereas, so a controversy, what's the word, arose and then literally ran with itself and
Yeah,
had
I
yeah
think it was more of a non-controversy than a controversy.
yeah
Now, do note that, and this has been the subject of that video as well.
hmm
That social media drives us to respond to things. It's we
hmm
want to have that little dopamine shot. We want to make the little hot take with the extra likes.
hmm
We want to signal to each other that we're on the good team. This is an essential part of social media these days, and
hmm
you really sometimes just need to, if you look at a mean tweet tweet, or if you look at an item that comes online, you need to think twice before you post. Unfortunately, social media is really bound on emotion, especially networks like Twitter.
Mhm.
And then often a small item like the reference video about poodling becomes a huge monster, and
Mhm.
that video has an excellent coverage on how most of the wave was basically furry saying from I'm not one of those people that hate poodling, and that's the really toxic tweet, so to speak, where I think 2% of all the tweets.
Mm. Yeah, I think it was around about 2%. It was a lot lower than I think anybody initially thought. And but it's that weird sort of, and maybe we can sort of segue into the idea of what social media actually does and how it affects us around. And because we'd be looking at a very sort of, I don't know what the demographic currently is, but one of the weirder things that I've begun to notice is that as soon as the commentator reaches a particular age, and I'm going to say it's around about after the age of 25, that they take a lot more of a careful approach in the way that they want to both consume media as well as sort of expose a particular group of people. You'll note that I think, and maybe this will be something to weirdly research, but what was it? The group that we had last week, person Scratch.
Oh, Quartz Husky.
Yes,
Yeah, parts.
Quartz. Yeah, so Quartz, for instance, I think in the earlier years of Quartz and how Quartz sort of continued to put media out there, um, it was a lot more sort of call out culture and pushing a particular type of agenda, saying just it sometimes feels like you're talking to a void just because we feel that our opinions obviously matter, and with Quartz, if you do all the right kind of research, that opinion becomes validated. But um, the the more the years went on, Quartz's videos became a lot more just set in fact.
Yeah, what you're saying here, I
Mhm.
recognize myself in this. Absolutely. And I have grown up in a world where internet was not as widespread as it's now. Now,
Mhm.
these days, everybody is walking around with basically the opportunity to broadcast everything to the social media of their choice right away. If you screw up on the schoolyard today, you will it will last for years easily. Um, back in those days, it really didn't happen that much. But what I see here as well, from when you're younger, you're much more outspoken. The whole idea of a hot take, and when a lot of people like that, and that you get the dopamine shot for that, that really toys with your head. But later you find out that all those things that short term goal, so to speak, didn't really matter in the long run. You want
Mm.
to make a change that lasts, and the path towards that long change never happens overnight. There is no such thing as an instant gratification when you work on global scale.
Yeah.
And that's what you see currently with a lot of the younger folks. I really sound old when I'm saying this. Um, you cannot change the world with a single tweet. It really takes time.
Yeah. But I mean, and with that, like it's that sort of, again, we before the call we were talking about, I guess, the demographics and who's speaking a large amount of the time, and it sort of does tie into that, to an earlier point that we were sort of touching on, the people who are speaking and the way that they speak. There's a small margin of people who say that this is a bad thing, but for some reason they almost get a larger amount of what do you call it?
Of press attention.
Yes, press and attention. For instance, like say, if we look at alt furries, you're looking at a group of people that is maybe 200 to 300, if that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, when you see something like this, also when it comes down to negative coverage of set groups, and of course they deserve a lot of that negative coverage because yeah. But then when you see, for example, someone saying from yeah, but the entire furry fandom is like this, and they quote a tweet like that, and you see like 10 retweets. That's not the entire furry fandom. This is just one guy that has a hot take for it. And what you said, the old furries, the reason why everybody talks about them is that the moment they post something stupid, everybody retweets it, everybody talks about it, and then we are the biggest PR vehicle for them.
Yeah. But and do you think that it's good that we call them out like that, or do you think it actually gives them power? Do you think?
Calling out is fine, but it has a tendency to completely overshoot. Um, and then you're starting to give them attention, and then they are getting. Then you're basically build a stage for them to broadcast on.
Yeah.
And while of course you want to say something about it, and everybody wants to give in their 2 cents, but the only reason why I initially heard about the alt first is because everybody was talking about it. So I got curious and looked into the matter. And then I found out they were, well, not much to looked into, so I moved.
There was not much to look into, so we moved on. I believe that's what he said.
Okay.
Yes, as in, I have been researching both for my studies and back for my work. I have been researching a lot of, let's say, people with views that destabilized entire countries. And the thing is that if you start to shed light on an idea, then that idea needs to be defended. And they basically, well, it crumbles, especially with the alt first. If you start to ask the questions for it, I've had a couple of conversations with some of them, and it doesn't hold any water. And after a while, then you just realize, okay, everything they say, it does not really hold any thought for it. So I moved on. And but this is a very difficult section, because at one point you say from okay, just ignore them, but if we all ignore them, then they can go on with whatever they do. But if everybody starts to give them attention, then they thrive on the attention, and nobody has a real good answer to this. And especially on the platforms of Twitter, then it's very difficult to give a proper solution to it.
So, with that in mind, and I guess with the context of digging up positivity, how do we counteract that then?
Well, when it comes down to the general perspective of the furry fandom, I think that if I bring in the positivity, the positive parts of items, you also get to show the other direction. Like there are also good things happening. For example, we all hear negative news about China lately, and that with good right, because they're doing a lot of things that are not very that are despicable at this moment. But they are also planting a lot of trees, and both India and China are the cause that they posted. They planted the most trees of all countries in the last year. But on the other end, China also has done a couple of things against the environment that caused a lot of anger by a lot of people, like the CFK pollution that are causing that the hole in the ozone layer at the South Pole is for the first time in years no longer shrinking, mostly thanks to the CFKs that are being released in the atmosphere by China. So it's a really really double-edged sword, so to speak. From on the one end, they're doing good, but on the other end, they're doing bad things as well. And the
Yeah.
same thing goes in the furry fandom. There are a lot of things going on in the furry fandom that I do not approve of, but there are also so much good things, and everybody is covering the bad things already.
Mm.
There is so much coverage of it, but I'd like to do my part in covering the good things as well, to make sure that the people don't forget that the world that we're living in is not just all bad.
Yeah. And I mean, you've released a fair amount of videos by now. Do you feel like, again, do you feel that that sort of focus has garnered in some senses like a good positive feedback towards you and the channel itself?
Yeah. So far, of course, you got your fair share of internet trolls and toxic
Mm.
people. You always got those. It's YouTube. But in general, like the vast majority of the people that watch my videos are very positive on it, and on the feedback for those videos. Then I also try to improve my shows with that. And the same thing goes with the yearly charity videos. For example, last year, well, 2018, I had a whole meta story about it, that we were in a spaceship, that we're going to planet Earth, and we were watching all the statistics. And the production value of that video went through the roof.
Mm.
But in general, I got a lot of feedback from a lot of people that wanted to show that video to their parents
Mm.
from, hey, we're doing so much good, and they just were interested in the statistics. So a small intro just showing the statistics and not the entire meta story around it. So we ditched the meta story, and that saved me 2 months of production value, that too. But yeah, thanks to the feedback, the video ended up the way it did.
Yeah, and I mean it was a great video. Like I know that we featured in there, so there was some personal skin in the game there. We were actually, I think, if I remember when the video first came out, like we shared it as much as we possibly could, and then watched it, and we were like, "Yay!" Because it's definitely something to sort of like feel good about, and that's something that we feel that even though we're diametrically one of these smaller conventions, but we still make your list, and that for us actually becomes a goal more than anything else. I know that when we first made the list, we were very surprised. That was 2 years back. And then when we made the list this year, we were like, okay, what happened? Are we still where we were supposed to be? And then we were sort of outdone. And now I'm kind of sitting here going like,
We can do better.
we can do better. Yeah. Like 50 odd people just sitting there going like, we will do better on a per for dollar ratio. But again, it all depends on where donors come from
Yeah,
sometimes.
and you bring up a very interesting point, because this is something that we have been struggling with, so to speak. Because how do you rank the furry conventions?
Mm.
So at one point we did the average per fur race. At the other point we had the total for it, because there are a lot of other aspects in the world
Yeah.
that, for example, $1 in Texas is worth less than $1 in, let's say, India.
Mm.
And or in this case, $1 in South Africa.
Mhm.
That difference need to be taken into account as well, because someone in California can yeah, the $1 for them means a lot less.
Mm.
And all these little aspects. So we always try to make it as honest and as possible. So at this point, we just did alphabetical order, because we honestly didn't know anymore.
Yeah. But and it's again like it is something that we do look forward to on a yearly basis. I remember again this year we were actually anticipating the release, and it's definitely something that like you should be lauded for, because it's something that allows people to realize that the fandom itself is a lot more than people criticize it.
Yeah, exactly. And
Um,
also, thanks to that, I think that you guys contacted me 2 years ago
mm,
about this all. This very interview, this very radio show is a result of that. I included you in that list, and you rightfully earned that place. Absolutely. I mean, and this is just generally just feeling very good. It makes me all warm inside.
Mm. And that's the kind of positivity that I guess when it comes to digging up positivity that we do want to be able to look for. And it's one of the reasons why I guess I brought up that idea of like, these 10 5-minute videos of people just fooling around and TikToks and whatnot, and then juxtaposing it with something like that, or doing some sort of commentary on this particular person. Oh no, they're bad. Shout them down. But like, is there something that we can learn from doing shouting down, for instance? Do you think that there is still something positive from that?
Yes. However, this thing that you're saying, call out culture,
Mhm.
not just in the furry fandom, but outside, call out culture is currently under attack, and for a good reason. It is a good thing that people are being held responsible for their actions. I absolutely agree with that. If you do
Mhm.
something bad, you need to face the
Yes.
consequences.
Hmm.
But call out culture devolved in something worse than that. They people were getting called out, and it was being retweeted and gained in force without the other person being able to defend themselves. And often, call out culture, both in the furry fandom and beyond, turned out to be a culture where there was people could be accused for something that they wouldn't have done, and before people started to realize from, hey, there's more to the story, their life was completely in ruins, they lost their job or something worse.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, I guess that is something that we can. It's just about being a little bit more careful about what you say and when you say it. I think it's it shouldn't be too difficult to follow that kind of methodology. That like before you do that, always have that kind of research. But in that same sense, people do actually put a fair amount of research into it. But I think that I don't know. I'm going to say that they pull the trigger a little bit faster than they should.
um There is a quote from a movie that I really love till this day. That quote is a little bit. It's from it's from Men in Black, I believe, which means a person is smart, but people are stupid. The moment that you have a mob, the moment that you have a group of people interacting with each other, the amount of harsh decisions or decisions driven by emotion really start to go off the charts, so
Mm.
to speak.
Mm.
And I've seen this both with panic within mobs, panic within groups. There are entire studies about this,
Mm.
how people respond under a stressful situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I want to come back to this at some point, but one of the things that I do also want to talk to you about before we run out of time is obviously, and you mentioned it as well. You've worked with Disney before, and I'm assuming that a fair amount of people consider that to be, I guess, the pinnacle of being a furry at times.
It is being regarded as such. Do note, I've been working for the commercials for Disney from 2004 till 2008. I
Mm.
worked at one of the studios that was working for Buena Vista, so basically the banner of Disney. Buena Vista is the distribution platform of
Yeah.
all the Disney movies and related. Um, it was a very interesting job to do. It taught me a lot about that. Well, one way to ruin the Disney magic is to work for Disney because you know all the systems that they're doing, all the things on how the commercials are being built up and things like that. But it was also a great job to do. It was actually in a way a dream come true.
Hmm.
Although I found out that the dream was not as dreamy as I initially thought, but it's I enjoyed working there.
Okay. When you say not as dreamy, is that more to do with the idea of like, and obviously Disney's come under it. controversy in respect to the idea that it's still a corporation. It's still this massive money hungry beast of a thing that sort of sits down and goes, we should probably remake this so that we can continue to keep it under copyright clauses. Like, does that, are these the kinds of things that you're talking about, or is there something else there that makes it less? Yeah.
Disney is indeed, above else, a corporation,
Mm.
and they strive for profit, to maximize their profit. And with every generation of Disney, with every change of the guard, it changes into that they become a little bit more passionate about their product, or that they become very pragmatic and are in it for the money. For Buena Vista, for example, it's a franchise. So every country in Europe is a franchise on itself, with the exception of the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, because they're that small. They are one franchise on itself, the so-called Benelux franchise. I'm talking about this because the French franchise of Buena Vista is created of all people that are extremely passionate about their work. So when you are delivering a commercial to Buena Vista France, they will nitpick about everything, but make sure that everything is correct. When I was doing the commercials of The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, they were having some questions about that. The commercial was not chronically accurate enough compared to the movie. However, in the Netherlands, I got the feedback from, wait a minute, that ferret and that pig, the entire commercial is about them. It's the Lion King. It should be more about that lion guy. What's his name? Mufasa or something?
Mm-hmm.
This was literally the conversation I've had over the phone, and I was just baffled from, don't you? They even make a point of it in the first Lion King movie, from, you don't call me pig, you call me Mr. Pig, and it's a warthog. So the difference between, let's say, money versus passion is different per country when it comes down to this.
Yeah. So, I mean, since we've sort of moved into the differences, I guess, between Europe and America, just by Buena Vista versus, I guess, Disney as a complete franchise. One of the questions that we sort of touched on before this is that entire idea of how Europe differs from America in respect to cultural background.
First, of course, Europe itself, there is no such thing as the European furry fandom. The Dutch furry fandom and the German furry fandom, they are at least all completely different. But what I've seen in my own little bubble of the furry fandom is that the American furries tend to be very much more politically active in this day and age than what I see in the European furry fandom. But this is also a product of their environment, because America currently, politics are their very hot button issue. And in the Netherlands, for example, in the Dutch fur fandom, it is a lot less, and it's a lot less polarized. So that our society reflects a lot in the furry fandom, so to speak.
Yeah. So with that, and I mean, like, again, where we're talking about the idea that like every country seems to have its own particular brand of fandom, I guess
Yeah.
that's I mean, it's not to say that you speak very often with, say, the French furry fandom or the let's see.
Well, you have the Belgian furries
Yeah.
and the Germans. A very nice different point is that, well, English is not our native language, both
Yeah.
in the German furry fandom and in the Dutch. However, in the Dutch furry fandom, if you got a group of furries and one English guy or one foreigner joins, we all switch to English.
Yeah.
How completely terrible thick our accents are, how terribly we speak English. We try to make ourselves understandable for the English fella.
Okay.
In Germany, if you join with a German group, they just continue to speak German, and I've experienced this not just once, but pretty much all the time. And of course, in the French fandom, they tend to be more turned into the French fandom itself as well. So they speak French by default. But the Dutch verse really try to go to English, no matter how poor their English skills are.
So I want to do a little experiment. So the people who are listening currently, Afrikaans is very, very close in some senses to Dutch.
I see it as a fork of the Dutch language. We went apart a long time ago.
But one would say that I think bar, I guess I'm gonna say like 10,000 words. The the general premise of what you're trying to say in Afrikaans is still very Dutch orientated, grammatically at least.
Mhm.
So while my Afrikaans is terrible, Scratch's Afrikaans is very good. So I'm going to give the floor to Scratch to randomly come up with an Afrikaans sentence.
Oh dear.
Well, way to put me on the spot.
You're welcome. He is welcome.
Wow. So, yeah, you're really putting me on the spot here now. Is this just to have like a comparison between whether like Dutch and Afrikaans can sort of understand each other back and forth kind of thing, or
that would be maybe one of the things. If you want, you can maybe just try to translate something, or if you had a question, try to translate it into Afrikaans.
Okay. Oh, let's just start simple. Hallo Thabo, welkom bij die podcast. Ons is baie bly om jou hier te hê. En ja, dankie dat jy ons dat jy gesels met ons.
Ik vind het ook erg gezellig, dankjewel. En ik heb heel veel plezier om hier bij de podcast te zijn.
Fantastisch.
Nice. Okay.
There you go.
And I think I understood that pretty well, Scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Same. If Dutch and Afrikaans people speak slowly to one another, then they could have a conversation, I think.
Yeah, what I noticed is because back when the languages split it up, because Dutch is using a vast array of loan words from both French and from English. However, those words that, especially the words that were introduced later, are in South-Afrikaans. Those words are being used as a descriptive form. I believe that elevator means huisbakkie in South Afrikaans.
Huisbak,
Yeah.
And that is descriptive because it's literally what it is. It's a bucket that you hoist up and people happen to stay in there.
Yes.
And I find it very intriguing, and also it's very nice to see how that language evolved separate from all the loan words that we have.
Yeah, I do find it interesting as well. It's that's a sort of a bit of a Germanic thing that still stays with us as well, because German also has the language is also very descriptive in what it is. Like, I think the German for ambulance is Krankenwagen. It's like pain wagon. So same thing. In Afrikaans, we have that same sort of, like you said, huisbak.
Yep.
Yeah, those kinds of things. It's a holdover that we still have over the Germanic languages.
I have a question though. I mean, if buck means bucket, I guess.
Yeah, or container, anything really. Buck, bowl.
Something that contains something.
Yeah.
Then what's a bucksteen?
Dit is 'n gebakte steen. Dit is 'n steen wat gebak is. It's a baked stone.
So, but I mean, like, but that's sort of the question that we have to get to, because if it's a huisbak, but it's a bucksteen.
Yeah, buck and it's they're not homophones, homonyms, like a word that is like it's.
It can mean different things.
Yeah.
A homonym.
A homonym, yeah.
Actually, Badge sort of, I think, tried to explain it to me, and I think that I'm gonna say how he explained it. He said it means bake and bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So technically, you can bake something in a bowl.
Yeah.
Bak bak. Ek bak om in die bak.
Yeah, exactly. You can do that.
Hmm.
You bake something in a bowl. It's in a bak. Yeah, it's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. Yo.
Bakbol.
What?
Bakbol. It's baking bowl. Yeah.
Yeah. Bakbol.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Afrikaans is weird.
Afrikaans is weird. Particularly because it's, especially in recent times, it's become a lot more. I remember I had this argument with your mom, Scratch,
Mm-hmm.
where we were talking about the idea of anglicizing Afrikaans.
Mm-hmm.
And she argued with you about it as well. Speak Afrikaans correct.
But is it also, I mean, you got in Afrikaans, you got terms like ik ben van de overseas. I'm from abroad.
Yeah. It's fun to
So,
see.
and that's English. That's an English loan word.
Overseas. Yeah,
Yeah, that is actually. We have our fair share of loan words as well, definitely. But yeah.
I mean, especially in the last 10 years, with the arrival of with the popularization of the internet, the world literally has become a global village. So everybody is influencing everything.
Mm-hmm. And when you have things like, how could I keep the thing with the owl?
Mm-hmm.
I was using it at some point to try to learn German.
Oh, Duolingo.
Duolingo, yeah.
Ah, yes.
It's
if you do not speak these two phrases, I come and take out your family.
Yeah.
Welcome with Duolingo.
The most aggressive owl that I've seen in my entire life.
Very scary ads for sure.
Oh, yes.
Are those actual Duolingo ads, though?
Not, they're ads, yes, but just in the obviously not in I'll do my Spanish lessons, please don't hurt my family kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It just looks sinister. I think they were introducing a dark mode or something. So it was like the little owl, the Duolingo owl, like standing in a lit backdrop into a darkened room kind of thing, like as if he was about to come and mutilate you. So it just looked threatening. But they were just introducing a dark mode, I think, or something.
Yeah. But and again, obviously, maybe we're speaking about like European furry fandoms and things like that. And I know that we had an interaction with, I swear to goodness, it was possibly one of the only at that time Serbian furs known to us. Was introduced to us as well.
Oh,
no.
Serbian. Do tell.
Yeah. I have forgotten their name actually, but like I know that we was one of our mutuals from this side had met them somehow, and we found out that they were pretty much one of like 3 Serbian furs in the area, and that they went to the same high school as Djokovic did. Djokovic, the tennis player.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why my interest is suddenly piqued, of course, is my dad is Serbian. So
really?
I do have my roots there. I have family around Beograd. This is also one of the reasons why the funny part is that a section of my family, my original name is Palic, and there is a section of my family called Merkovic. And at one point on Google Plus, when that still was a thing, I had my name there as Merkovic because, well, with Meerkat and then with the little Serbian twist on it. And I really got responses from my family. Don't you know how to spell the last name of part of your family? That was quite funny.
That's awesome.
I mean, within the European fandoms, and I mean, I know that America has its own sort of ways of dealing with the youth, and I know that South Africa does the same thing in some senses, but like because the furry fandom is so niche in the way that it approaches it, does Europe approach that differently? Are they a bit more open about this entire idea in comparison to, say, more English cultures where you want to sort of hide that kind of backgrounding?
Um, I cannot speak for most European countries. This time I speak mostly for the Dutch
Hmm.
furry fandom.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's my dad was always a little bit skittish about it. I mean,
Mhm.
he is a Serbian conservative. I mean, Eastern European countries are a little bit more rigid when it comes down to the family ties.
Yeah.
But he really started to open up when he saw that I was in my fursuit doing work for hospitals and doing a lot of charity work and things
Mhm.
like that. There is, in general, always when you introduce something new to people that they don't know of yet, they tend to think the worst of it.
Mhm.
And this also puts back a little bit on the initial reason, what I told you about digging up positivity.
Yeah.
If you start to show the people that what we're doing for children hospitals, what we're doing for charity events, and when you show the people of those happy children and what they're doing for them, it becomes a lot more accepted because they suddenly see the social value of what you're doing.
Mm. Um, that's a very good answer because obviously, one of the things that has been coming up, and I think it was because at the beginning of this week, if not just the end of last week, there was an article, I think it was out of the Rolling Stone magazine
hmm Yeah,
about,
a lot
yeah.
of furries went like, now we are mainstream, but Rolling Stone covers fandoms more often than that. I have not read the article. That's a disclaimer.
Mm. How do you think we should approach that kind of ideology moving towards a more public image? Do you think that we should go, say, the Uncle Kage way, where there's a group of people who sort of in some ways control the media from various countries?
I don't think that will ever happen because the furry fandom is too big and too diverse in everything in order to be controlled, so to
Mhm.
speak. We're very decentralized.
Yeah.
What I do work on is to make sure that if people start to Google for furry or to Google for my name because they have a business card from me, that they
Mhm.
see the good things and not necessarily immediately items that you do not want to confront parents with right away.
Of course. But yeah, that's always been an issue with the fandom, trying to not sanitize, but just somehow put up a like make the first thing in the search something wholesome.
Plus, there is also one thing that when I had this, if I only got $1 every time I had this conversation or this question, is when they ask you from, oh, are you doing naughty things in your suit or things like that, on which I usually respond like, not every football, because soccer is a very popular sport in our country. I respond like, well, not every soccer fan is a vandal. Not every soccer fan crashes the town after every game, and they suddenly realize from, oh yeah, that's indeed true.
And yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, like it's the same idea as like when say you're talking about sports, for instance. It's pretty much the same thing as like me coming out as a sports fan. Uh, yeah, believe it or not. I mean,
Ah,
can you bloody believe it? I like cricket. I like soccer sometimes. Hey, we
well,
will
as a
share.
meerkat, I can say I like crickets too, but I think we mean a different thing.
Yeah. It's little things like that, for instance, that again, it brings us all the way back to one of our initial conversation points is that because of these particular differences that we tend to have, you were talking about diversity within within the fandom. So, say we look at Duke the Dancing Dog, um, who pretty much dresses up as an American football player. Do we then connect that with Kyle Gold, who writes about American football players? Do you think that they should be in the same room together? Should we then sequester them away and go talk about football because we don't want to hear it, kind of thing?
No, but because the furry fandom is now this big, you got plenty of furry shows covering topics that, for example, completely do not relate with me, but have their own subset of fans,
Hmm.
and that's a fun thing. I mean, it's just like what you have with just about everybody, really. I mean, sure, we can be good friends. We would, if we meet each other on the convention, there would be plenty of things that we could talk about, plenty of common grounds. But when you started explaining about crickets, when you're halfway the rules, I'm not sure if I'm entirely there yet.
Yeah. No, of course. And weirdly enough, the best way to learn is through experience, either to play it or to watch it while somebody explains it to you.
People have tried and failed miserably. I'm sorry.
Squash?
Squash I've tried myself, which is extremely exhausting, but it was fun.
Scratch and I used to play squash every other day.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I love this the like the rules of cricket. Someone put this out there. The explanation is you have two sides, one out in the field and one in. Each man that's in the side that's in goes out, and when he's out, he comes in, and the next man goes in until he's out. When they all go out, the side that's out comes in, and the side that's in goes out and tries to get those coming in out.
You lost me.
Yeah, I know that's.
I play the game and I'm lost.
I know. I love this explanation because it's just made to confuse people.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like binary code 0011111001.
Ins and outs, yeah.
Yeah, ins and outs. I mean, speaking of ins and outs, the way that the furry fandom sort of builds itself, especially, I mean, you've been around since the late 90s, I believe, yes?
Yeah, 96, 97, something like that.
How has it changed between 1996 and now?
Back when I got in the furry fandom, of course, it was much smaller, but they were most of the furs were really, really, really nerdy compared to today, this day and age. But that's also because in 97, 98, the internet was still, you needed to really know what you were doing if you were going on the internet. It was not as easy to get on. Sure, you had to configure your modem. It made the Skrillex sound, and then you were online. And but you still had to actively search for that. In order to chat, you had to go on the IRC network. In general, it was a lot more difficult to get in to find the groups. These days, it's relatively easy to find it. Also, besides the conventions itself, especially in the US, have become much more commercial. You've seen that back in the days, it was if you wanted to buy a fursuit, of course, the quality was a lot less, but I think that 300, 400 euros that was deemed extremely pricey. And these days, we're talking about 10, 20, 25,000 euros. And those are no longer an exception. Of course, they're the vast minority, but the average price, which is now between 1.5 and 5,000 euros, that was unheard of up to 2005, something like that.
But I mean, that's also got to do with practice and the use of material and where you source that material from. So, and weirdly enough, I want to segue that into sort of that idea of commercializing fursuits, for instance. Do you think, much like I think it was League of Legends that has now recently done it, do you think that there is a niche for a high, like super high quality or super big company like I'm gonna think Marks and Spencers, but that's not the kind of thing that I want to think about. It's big clothing companies. Badge. like big
Gucci
clothing.
fursuits, things like
Gucci
that.
fursuits. Yes. Does that does the idea of and yeah, because that also actually goes to say the Brazil Fur Convention with that shoe brand
Converse.
Converse.
Yeah, and there was this one furry brand that was really trying to promote themselves the way as in a high-end fashion brand. The name, I'm extremely bad at names, but they were trying it and it did not go very well, as far as I know. But when it comes down to the really good fursuit makers,
Mhm.
if you compare that to the quality of the fursuits that I see on theme parks or what are deemed very good mascot suits,
Yeah.
the quality of the average fursuit maker that I've seen, and we're talking about the price bracket between 1.5 between and 4,000 euros.
Mhm.
The quality on average is vastly superior than anything
Yeah.
I've seen in the commercial
Yeah.
world.
Absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
Look at what's that American, not American, Canadian weird thing for baseball.
But the World
Like
Series?
no, was it? That's not baseball. Sorry, hockey. Starts with
Yeah,
a
that
G. What's his
weird
name? The
Cookie Monster
orange
shaped
yeah.
orange. Yeah, that
Uh,
yeah. When I
gritty,
saw that
gritty.
was like, yeah, I not a fan of the design. That is.
Yeah. And I believe there was a Japanese cricket, no, not cricket team, rugby team, the Sunwolves, who used that generic, what was it, that generic wolf's face mask thing?
Yeah.
The one that you can literally buy out of like a general store.
Yeah,
You
I
buy
know
it
the
for
one you're
like,
talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We had it here in South Africa as well. I know that one of our um, in fact, one of our ex-presenters actually has has one of those wolf masks, for instance. I
Mm.
think he changed the fur color.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, accretion.
Yeah.
Huh. But that's also very interesting because I mean, the more niche it becomes, the more it feels like it's a niche object because it's priced outside of the range of most people. Do you feel like, and that's actually something that we can actually sort of segue to again. There seems to be this divide between people who have large amounts of money within the furry fandom, who gain attraction just for having large amounts of money and being able to buy suits at that sort of price range, and then everybody else. Do you feel like that divide is something that we should begin to focus on?
Well, it is something that eventually happens with everything where a lot of people are. The furry fandom itself has grown exponentially over
Hmm.
all areas of society. That includes the richer areas, and you will always have that trust fund kid that can buy dozens of fursuits and you can't. There is always people that flash around what they have, flexing. And this is not limited to the furry fandom itself, because, well, the furry fandom is a mirror of society, which includes all the good and the bad parts. And one of those parts is that there will be rich kids that will always have more than you. Um, I have been accused of being one of those. While in the past, when I got into the furry fandom, I was almost being declared bankrupt, so to speak. I came from the bottom. I worked hard in order to get Tabo as a fursuit itself.
Yeah.
Between the idea of me having a fursuit and Tabo itself was 10 years, and
Jeez.
I then Tabo was also that's why I hold that fursuit in such high regard, that I worked so hard to get where I am with that fursuit. So it holds a lot of emotional value to me,
Yeah.
and I've seen that with let's say, for example, people that can get a fursuit right away, that they do not care that much about the fursuit. Or some people, they sell their fursuits literally a month after they've got it. They just have it for the gram, make some social media pictures, and then they sell it again.
Huh.
I wouldn't be able to do that.
Neither do I.
I would hoard fursuits if I ever could get them.
You and me both now. Okay. Yes. Hoarding fursuits. That's
Well, I got 2 fursuits. The other one is a lot less known, but maybe you've seen it coming by Gideon Grey from Zootopia. I don't
Oh
really see it
yeah.
as
I
a
have seen it.
fursuit. It's more cosplay. I reserve that fursuit for like Comic Con, things like that, because it's a very recognizable character.
Oh, nice.
However, I have a little bit of a luxury problem. I lost a lot of weight after I ordered the fursuit, so I'm not really a good Gideon anymore.
Ah. Well, I mean,
Heaven forfend, what a first world problem.
I know.
you could take him in, I guess. Just like
Or
pin
put
his
padding
sides.
in. You could
Yeah.
probably put some padding in there.
Yeah, padding would actually be a good idea. Like,
Yeah, I was thinking at point of padding, but if you put a lot of padding in, I could actually play young Gideon, so I will have a license to do all kind of stupid.
do you your experiences with Disney, for instance, like what did that actually do to your? I guess I'm gonna call it suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, this is the same thing of if you if you are a fan of something and you start to work for that, it becomes the magic of said object is ruined, or you try to become part of that machine in order to be the magic for the next generation, so to speak. I already was already was acquainted with the fact that Disney was not as magical as they pretend to be years before I started to work for Disney, because my ex-girlfriend worked for Disney as well, so I had my fair share of stories. But yeah, if you like a company, don't start to work for them. It's like if you love this restaurant and for a day you start to work and you see what's going on in the kitchen, chances are you're not gonna like that restaurant as much as you used to.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah,
It's even a Dutch frying from Take a Look into the Kitchen in Dutch.
No, and that's actually something that happened to me. There was a restaurant, a little bistro that I used to go to for a particular type of coffee. I would go there either before or after a particular working thing that I did. I decided that I needed to work for them. Within, I think I only worked for them for like, what was it, a month? Scratch?
I don't know.
Yeah. I was fired because I didn't work up to their standard. It was actually like, and I mean, this is coming from a person who at that point had barman experience, waitering experience, like up the wazoo. Going into that particular, it was high end coffee that I was selling instead of
swill.
I'm not necessarily sure what it would be. Yeah, close enough. But like that's pretty much the difference. I'd be serving cyclists versus, on the other hand, I was just sort of serving people who were coming in for an afternoon quickie. Not in that way. But
Afternoon cuppa.
Afternoon cuppa. But like with that sort of ideology and the idea of what service industry does, we tend to sometimes, I think, treat people who run conventions very similar to the way that we treat wait staff. We expect a particular kind of thing. We actually speak to them in that particular way. I know that Scratch and I have had our fair share of that interaction where it feels as though, while they appreciate coming to the convention itself, they hold us as almost wait staff to the convention. rather
As
than.
someone who organized
Mhm.
conventions, helps organizing conventions, and worked in the industry, service industry, I agree with you. You can see plenty of subreddits about horrible, horrible people in the service industry, and I know plenty of cases of furries that were treating the furry convention staff on a lower standard than what you'd expect to be treated for what you're actually doing.
So
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to give a little anecdote here from both for furry events and for when I'm making initial contact for people to do charity events with, or I owned my little business for a while. If I want to see how a person truly is, I take them out for dinner and I watch them how they treat the staff of said restaurant. And usually, I have a restaurant where I often go to. I know the staff there very well. I ask them to do something wrong on purpose, like, for example, the steak medium rare instead of they ordering something else, and see how they respond. And it really tells so much more about a person than what they ever would tell you.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
But but then again, I mean, if sure, fooling with someone's food though, sure.
No, I'm
Mm.
not poisoning them by all
No,
means.
it's not
We're
about
talking little things
Like
like,
you
for
order Coke,
example,
but you get a Fanta kind of thing.
yeah, things like that. No,
Jeez, I wouldn't
just
mind a friend.
small items. Not don't. From what I see, how you responded is, I'm not poisoning them.
Mm.
Don't worry about.
You're killing them all.
Wow.
You must.
It's more like digging up a grave for them.
Yeah. I would dig up a grave for you. No, I shouldn't sing.
Be quiet.
No, but the last time when I did something with that is that they asked for a side bottle of ketchup and they got a side bottle of mayonnaise. That kind.
Oh,
So
oh
it's
no, that's
nothing. It's nothing with the food. It's just basically something is different than they expected.
one of these things is not like the others. So
Okay.
with
No.
that, yeah, with that sort of ideology in mind, like how do you think? Because obviously you've been that set, and I do want to actually use that as our segue to all of the other work that you've been doing for conventions and helping with fundraising and things like that. What are the major key points to what a convention should be doing to be able to ensure a that they're respected as people and B, that they do the right thing.
Well, the point for respected as people, treat everybody equally.
Mhm.
And this is something that sounds like so completely obvious, but especially with smaller conventions, but even with the bigger conventions, I've seen it as well, where staff are helping friends a little bit more than they used to. Than they should do. Nepotism, so to speak, from that they let certain people get away with things while other people are being left aside. If you are giving that impression that you are not enforcing the rules or enforcing the rules unequally, then you will get a cluster duck on your hand real soon.
Mm.
That's
Hmm.
very true.
And especially if you're part of the staff, you should give an example. So, of course, hold yourself to a good standard. And if you try to do that, there's always someone who complains. I've had that with my first convention, I've had that with the last convention I worked on. There is always someone who complains. But make sure that you treat everybody equally and do not take everything that they are saying towards you personally.
Yeah.
And if the majority of the convention is satisfied, then you are satisfied as well.
Mm.
Of course, this goes for the main thing: treat everybody equally, up to the same standards.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, like weirdly enough, and that's like with that sort of ideology in mind, like a large amount of convention should be doing it that way, but because the larger conventions tend to, in many senses, rely on help staff more than anything else. Like, how do you then control that sort of thing? I mean, you're looking at, for if you look at Midwest Fur Fest, their help staff is the amount of people that come to our convention. Just help staff.
In Euroferns, for example, the staff is being divided in several groups. You got the media group, you got the charity group, you got security. Everybody is their own group with their own hierarchy. Because at one point, when the furry convention is big enough, you cannot micromanage all the groups anymore. You simply have to leave that alone.
Yeah.
A good hierarchy is essential for that. You need to have a good leader per group, and a good help is very difficult to find, especially when you start as a convention. We all had moments where even people with the best of intentions turn out to be not very good in the role they've been given. And sometimes they realize that themselves, sometimes they need to be told, and then you have a very uncomfortable conversation, especially if it's your friend. But those things need to happen in order to have a good, well-oiled convention going on.
Oh, for sure.
And it's very easily said, but it's very difficult to do because good volunteers ask any volunteer organization based on volunteers, no matter if it's a furry convention or the animal ambulance of a certain district in the Netherlands. Good volunteers are extremely difficult.
I mean, how do you make that? How do you prioritize that? Like when you do have volunteers, for instance, what do you do to keep them on?
Make sure that they're a valued member of the team. Also, make sure that they're being listened to, because the moment when a volunteer, no matter how dedicated they are, if they feel they're no longer being listened to or that their work does not matter, they will be gone really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And that's definitely something to look into. Because again, we haven't grown past. Did we get to 60 last year?
Yeah, and no, we just fell short of 60, I think.
Just short of 60, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like there is growth. It's just we. Okay, no, random aside. We'll.
Yeah.
We need to have a meeting.
Oh, sleepyhead.
So yeah, sorry, I've been up quite early.
No worries.
Yeah, we are sort of coming into the last quarter of an hour of the podcast. Anything you want to wrap up, Ivik, before we start the closing?
Well, I mean, we actually never really got to this to this point, but like, what are your other projects that you're currently working on? Things that are up and coming soon. I know that you mentioned charities. Maybe we can just quickly talk about that.
Sure. When it comes down to charity events, I am soon going to be at a small town all the way in the south of the Netherlands, where every year, every couple of times a year, there will be people driving around with children who are hospital bound for most of their lives. And they will be driving around in very big trucks or very fancy sport cars and things like that. And around that, there are various festivities with song and dance, and of course, a whole bunch of cuddly animals that are walking around. And yeah, that's I will be there somewhere next month, in 2 months. Yeah,
That's awesome. That sounds like a very nice cause.
Mm.
And a few times a year, there's Stichting Opkikker. That is a little bit of a a pun. The
Mm.
logo of it is a big frog. They pick out various families with children who are hospital bound, and they will invite them to a small bungalow park. And in that bungalow park, the entire family can have one day just that they can do whatever they want without worrying of that there are no hospital, no ambulances nearby. They can just do whatever they want. There will be various groups there providing entertainment up to that. The kids can go for a helicopter ride,
Oh
or
wow.
also rides in
Mm.
fancy cars, or go on a boat, and it's really fun for them, and
Yeah.
you can really see them enjoying the day.
It sounds a lot like the what's it, the Make a Wish Foundation that America has.
It's pretty much, I think, 90% overlap.
Yeah,
That sounds awesome though.
that really does sound awesome, and I mean that it sounds like a very good cause as well.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
And also, this is not necessarily charity, but every year there is a Harry Potter themed convention. And a while ago, I was going there with a friend, and due to my round glasses on my fursuit, people started to call me Harry Otter. And
Aw.
these days, I am being invited as a guest, and I am being introduced as Harry Otter. And if you name me Tabo, everybody is just looking like, who
Yeah.
are you talking about? They don't know my name. They only know me by Harry Otter.
Harry
Even the
Otter.
organization is calling me Harry Otter. It's quite fun.
That
That's awesome.
that's a
That's
wonderful little anecdote.
yeah.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate that. It's been a blast, and it's been very informative as well. Really do appreciate that. But yeah, if you want to plug anything, now is the time to do that for anybody who's listening.
Yes, I will. Maybe you will retweet it. I would like to put a little spotlight on Dixie Lioness.
Hmm.
Um, she on her Twitter account, she retweets the various charity causes throughout the entire year. She
Hmm.
also is taking part of various charity activities around Chicago, like the ALS Walk, and
Hmm.
she often hosts charity streams as well. And she really has been one of the biggest forces for good in my life in the past few years.
Mm. All right. So I mean, yeah, like for instance, yeah, 2019 furries raised 1.1 million US dollars.
That
Yeah.
is, yeah. I was still surprised that we made it past the 1 million, and I hope that this year we will pass the 1.5 million mark. A
Yeah.
meerkat can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
N- no, I mean that's absolutely correct. I think that um, if we do want to continually build that positivity, and obviously the work that you do definitely helps that. But like, we do need to focus more on those particular things. It's because a large amount of what I've seen, at least, we mentioned this a bit earlier, is that entire idea of commercialization of the furry fandom. And it seems like every other person wants to commercialize this bit of it or that bit of it. I mean, you look at a particular company with B and D somewhere in their name, um, seem to be cornering a particular type of market.
Yeah, but that is one thing that will happen with everything that gets to a certain size. You've seen that with the comic book industry, you've seen that with the animation industry, I've seen that with various fantasy conventions as well. The moment when a group reaches a certain size, there is a market, and when there is a market, you will have merchants.
Yeah.
One of the things that we can all work on, and you two are doing an exquisite job on that already, is to make sure that the base of this all stays a healthy community, one that we all like to be in. And so far, what I see that what you guys are doing and the people in the chat, it is an environment where we can all enjoy ourselves and feel safe.
I think that is definitely something that's very important, because you can't belong somewhere if you don't feel safe.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yes, thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate that. And yeah.
Yes, it was an absolute pleasure having you on, Thabo.
Really
Thank you
was.
so much for coming.
Yes.
Thank you kindly for having me here.
All right. And in about 5 to 10 minutes from now, we're going to be continuing the podcast, but the radio show. I will be here until midnight for the next, until midnight, our time, which would be, what's that, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Around about 2.5 hours. We'll be playing music, mostly metal or whatever you guys interested in listening. If I have it, I'll play it. And yeah, thank you for listening to south-afrifur, and thank you again, Thabo, for being with us. We really do appreciate that. Actually, wait, I have one more question. One last question. Why Thabo?
Thabo is a name that means happiness, and it really covers what Thabo stands for.
In which language?
And it was a part of a little contest that I had in the beginning, because I could not come up with a name. And a friend of mine, a white dragon from the Netherlands named Rin, came up with a name, and it really stuck, and it had a good ring to it.
So no connection with the South African name Thabo?
Yes, she chose the name because it was South Africans.
Okay. All right. Sweet. Okay, I'm sorry, just random aside that probably
no
should have
worries.
been asked like a long time ago. But yes, thank you very much. Really do appreciate that. And thank you all for listening. We'll be on again in the next 5 to 10 minutes with music until midnight.
All right. See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.